Boomer from Cannon WBT.
Huh? It's 5:05 and welcome in to a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, the presidential race continues to heat up as we sit here just 22 days ahead of Election Day, and with that, North Carolina continues to be a main point of emphasis for candidates. J.D. Vance, who is the vice presidential nominee, was in Charlotte over the weekend. He's got an event scheduled in Wilmington in the middle part of the week, but over the weekend it was the vice president in Kamala Harris who was in North Carolina. She spent Sunday afternoon with a crowd at East Carolina University in Greenville, where she spoke for less than 25 minutes and spent a majority of her comments attacking former President Donald Trump. She claimed, however, that her campaign is focused in the home stretch of the election.
Ours is a campaign focused on issues that matter, for example, to working families across America, like bringing down the cost of living, investing in small businesses and entrepreneurs. We are focused on protecting reproductive freedom. We are focused on keeping our nation secure.
That was Harris at ECU over the weekend. She also claimed that former President Donald Trump is hiding.
It makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on?
That was Harris over the weekend. A report from Fox News out yesterday indicates that the Trump-Vance ticket has done 74 interviews since August. That compares to just 39 from the Harris and Walz campaign. The current status of the race in North Carolina looks like this. It's a tight one, like many other swing states. According to Real Clear Politics, who takes averages of a variety of political polls, they currently have Donald Trump with a 0.5% lead in the state of North Carolina. Early voting does begin this Thursday across the Tar Heel state. We'll have all the information you need to know for early voting. We'll also take a look at mail-in ballot numbers and everything that you need to know coming up as we roll through this week right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Taking a look at some other news this weekend, in Moore County, deputies arrested a man Friday that they said was removing political signs the day before. According to the Moore County Sheriff's Office in a post on their social media, a deputy saw a man named Lowell Simon, who's 68 years old, around 5:25 p.m. Thursday evening, removing campaign signs from the roadside near Seven Lakes Drive in the West End community. The deputy, who was responding to an unrelated call at the time, followed up at Simon's home and found the signs in his vehicle. Simon is not just a regular citizen, he is a candidate for state house and also the head of the Democrat Party in Moore County. He admitted to removing the signs, which the deputies recovered and returned to their original owners. Authorities issued a warrant for his arrest on Friday and charged him with 2 counts of misdemeanor larceny of political signs. He was released under a written promise to appear in court, and in response to his arrest, the Moore County Democrat Party, which he leads, wrote, quote, "Moore County Democrats and Democrats across the state do not condone theft or destruction of property regarding political signs," end quote. And the Democrat House Campaign Caucus said, quote, "We acknowledge that Lowell Simon was caught doing something we don't condone. We are addressing it and moving forward. Not only is it something that the Democrat House Campaign Caucus doesn't condone, it's something that's illegal in the state of North Carolina." We'll continue to track these details right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Well, here's some positive news out of Western North Carolina this morning. The group known as Samaritan's Purse, they have been a huge instrumental help in the recovery in Western North Carolina over the past 2+ weeks. They received a check for over $50,000 from the state of North Carolina on Friday. That money coming from unclaimed funds from the state treasurer's office. State Treasurer Dale Folwell made a check presentation to Samaritan's Purse at their North Wilkesboro office late last week. He was alongside state legislatures and many high-ups within the Samaritan's Purse organization. Folwell said this during the presentation. Amid the unimaginable loss, pain, and suffering felt in towns and crossroad communities ruined by raging flash floods of historic proportions, the spirit and strength of North Carolinians is shining through in our signature neighbor helping neighbor mentality. The massive relief effort from state-based organizations like Samaritan's Purse deserve our appreciation and support. Money that has become undeliverable for a variety of reasons is safeguarded at the state treasurer's office unclaimed property division until its rightful owner claims it. During a review of data from unclaimed properties, often commonly called nccash.com, staff from Folwell's office found $50,130.96 that belonged to Samaritan's Purse. That unclaimed property included bank accounts, wages, utility deposits, insurance proceeds, stocks, bonds, and other abandoned property that was abandoned and then, of course, given to this unclaimed property division. According to Steve Nickel, who is Samaritan's Purse Vice President of Donor Ministries, he said, for more than 50 years, we have met desperate needs and saved countless lives with the purpose of sharing God's love through his Son, Jesus Christ. We work in more than 100 countries, ministering to victims of war, poverty, disease, famine, and disaster. He said that the $50,000 will equip Samaritan's Purse with additional resources that it needs to continue helping those that have been so unfortunately impacted by the effects of Hurricane Helene. He said our teams are responding in 3 areas to devastation across North Carolina, along with 3 additional sites in Florida and Georgia. We are assisting homeowners with roof tarping, mud outs, debris cleanup, chainsaw work. As many churches and organizations in Western North Carolina are caring for people without access to basic necessities, Samaritan's Purse is supplying them with food, water, and other relief to help them serve their communities. Samaritan's Purse is providing relief to Boone and other areas of Watauga County and surrounding communities like Ashe, Avery, and Buncombe counties, which include many areas that were completely obliterated by Helene. Asheville, Black Mountain, Swannanoa. They're also assisting our neighbors over in parts of eastern Tennessee as well. So great news to see, obviously, that the work on the ground does continue. It's an unfortunate situation at the end of the day, but great to see that organizations, and those in the case of Samaritan's Purse, those based in North Carolina, are continuing the great work, and that the state treasurer and Dale Folwell, the unclaimed property divisions, was able to chip in with a $50,000 check to Samaritan's Purse. It's 5:13 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time for a look at traffic on your Monday with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good morning.
Today, noon to 3. WBT.
Your emergency situation station.
Huh?
It's 5:20. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Also streaming live this morning on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. Well, the vice president was in North Carolina this weekend. She spent Sunday afternoon with a crowd at East Carolina University in Greenville. As we sit here this morning, just 22 days ahead of Election Day. Early voting does begin in the state coming up on Thursday, and there have already been tens of thousands of mail-in ballots that have been cast in the state. Harris spoke for about 25 minutes and spent a majority of her speech attacking former President Donald Trump, indicating that he's currently hiding in the campaign.
It makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on?
Harris spent the majority of her comments, as I mentioned, attacking the former president, talking about how her campaign is one that is forward-looking and solving issues that the American people are dealing with, including inflation, the rising costs of goods and services, home ownership, while she claimed that the former president's campaign is one that is focused on the past and will make things more expensive for you and your family. All polling indicating North Carolina going to be a very close race. We'll get the latest on polling from the Carolina Journal poll that's expected out later on this week. Well, some good news out of Western North Carolina. Samaritan's Purse, which is based in Boone, it's a Christian humanitarian aid organization, received nearly $50,000 in unclaimed funds from the North Carolina State Treasurer's Office to aid their ongoing recovery efforts after Hurricane Helene impacted Western North Carolina. State Treasurer Dale Folwell, who was accompanied by local legislatures, presented the check to Samaritan's Purse representatives at their North Wilkesboro office late last week. The funds, which were discovered in the state's unclaimed property division, will help the organization provide vital relief to communities hit by the hurricane, including roof tarping, debris cleanup, and essential supplies like food and water. Samaritan's Purse is well known for its global disaster response efforts and is currently focusing on helping homeowners and churches in affected areas in Western North Carolina. It's 5:23 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. As portions of Western North Carolina get back to some semblance of normalcy after the impacts from Hurricane Helene, there are some real questions about what does the future of education in some of these areas look like. David Larson, the opinion editor over at the Carolina Journal, joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. David, good morning to you. Appreciate the time. You've got an interesting opinion piece about maybe some things that we learn from this devastation. What do you got?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. I was interested in, school choice is a big topic in general, but some of school choice models that, micro schools is one model people learned a lot about during COVID. It became popular, but charter schools is another one that I looked at a little bit. During Katrina, that became very important. So my article just kind of looked at some lessons from other disasters, how people or different school districts, when their normal schools were taken out offline and they had to really improvise, how they leaned on some of these more nimble systems. So just to give you an idea, Hurricane Katrina, that was back in 2005, in August, right before all the schools opened, got hit by, a notorious hurricane that everybody's, talked about since, but it made 100 of their 128, I believe, schools unusable. So right before schools opening, they have basically no place to send their kids in the vast majority of schools. So they called what I think was a recovery school district is what they created. And they had already had kind of the lowest test scores and performance in the state of Louisiana. So they decided, you know what, why don't we just scrap the whole thing and go with charter schools? And it was actually a pretty wild success in that they've stuck with it. Only this school year was the first time they've opened up a traditional public school since 2005. So they have their first K-8. I believe that's a traditional public school. But the rest of the city's publicly funded schools are charter schools, and it's moved them from there could be other factors involved, obviously, but they moved from the bottom of the barrel in Louisiana. And now New Orleans schools are somewhere in the middle, from about 23% proficiency on state exams to 56, is according to some data that I cite in my article. But just interesting to see that kind of approach, just shifting to a more nimble system where you're kind of institutional public schools that all the kids were going to aren't available, and people shifted quickly to something that is pretty adaptable. And if something doesn't work, you could shift to another. Kids can go to one until maybe this other one they hear about over here, and it just allows a lot of flexibility, which I think in these kind of post-disaster scenarios you really need. I also brought up COVID. I don't know if you want to have any questions about that, or you want me to keep going, but COVID was another interesting example, just because a lot of these public schools were open in a sense, but it was mostly remote instruction, or they would have learning that was limited in some senses, or parents were not appreciating kind of the way that the school system was running for a while. A lot of them had to stay home. Like, the school be open, but the kid had to stay home and do remote instruction. So parents, unless they're an essential worker and had to go out, they have to figure out a way to, okay, maybe I have to stay home and I have to monitor these remote classes, and the kids aren't really paying attention to the classes and things like that. So that led to a whole other thing, which some people call pods, or other people call micro schools. But those are another nimble post-disaster school choice kind of model that really worked, and has actually taken off after that. It's sort of a one-room schoolhouse almost model, where people in a neighborhood, they pool their resources and they say, let's get one teacher for our 20 kids, and the kids are various ages, but you have pretty good teacher-student ratios, and you can have it very individualized, and a lot less red tape involved, and so
Sure.
they're able to have a lot of control over the curriculum. So that's another example of post-disaster. So in Western North Carolina, there's a lot of these schools aren't even able to be assessed yet because they're not reachable. That's Kathy Truitt, our Department of Public Instruction. Our superintendent, she said, they can't even reach them to assess the damage. And for each one that does need to be replaced, if they have to completely rebuild it, it'd be about $43 million on up. And then many others have mold or other damage, so they've requested, I think, 160 some million as a preliminary. They say it's probably gonna be a lot more than that, but they say let's just have a little preliminary ask of that much to do mold mitigation and other things. But it could be similar to Katrina, where there's just a large percentage of public schools are not usable, and so you have to pivot to something a little more nimble for the time being.
It's an interesting conversation. We'll continue with David Larson coming up after this. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. 529 News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT, and now time for another look at your roads with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. We don't have any.
Talktoberfest News and Brews.
Wednesday, October 30th.
Presented by Kraft Body Scan.
Go to WBT.com for details. Cheers.
535 News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. My name's Nick Craig. We are also streaming live on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel this morning. We are continuing to track destruction out west, and while the power outage situation has gotten much better than what we saw in the last couple of days as we rounded out last week, still a lot of customers without power, but big-time improvements. As of this morning, 17,306 customers remain without power, and there's really only two counties that have the bulk of those without power. That's Yancey and Mitchell County, where in some cases more than a third of the residents that live there and, of course, have electrical service there are still without power this morning. That restoration does continue. Turning our conversation to Asheville and the very popular River Arts District, and what could this look like from the economic impact side? Well, Asheville's River Art District is hoping that they can attempt to rebound because it's estimated that 80% of the district was completely destroyed by Helene. That's according to Katie Cornell, who's with Arts AVL. She said that in an update on Sunday. She noted that the River Arts District includes 26 warehouses and housed over 300 artists in total. Buncombe County is the #1 arts district in the state and 47th in the country, according to a recent study. And with that, it is a very large part of Asheville's economy. She said, quote, "Our creative community is one of the things that makes the Asheville area stand out from the rest. Our artists and our art organizers are a major economic driver in the area." According to Arts AVL, Buncombe County's creative economy accounts for nearly $1 billion in annual sales and supports nearly 8,500 jobs. According to Katie Cornell, she says most of our arts professionals are out of work, and it's crucial that we get our artists back up to work as soon as possible, or we will lose them. And while, yes, this is a major economic driver in the area, unfortunately, the effort is still on many folks getting power back. We just talked about that in Buncombe County. There are major questions about the water infrastructure system, as there are 2 water treatment facilities that sustained major damage in regards to Helene, which could cause water disruptions in some of those areas for years to come. It's estimated that it could take 3 to 5 years to build a brand new wastewater treatment facility if that was deemed necessary. We don't know if that's going to be the case yet, as that damage still continues to be assessed. Major economic impacts in western North Carolina. We continue to track it here on the Carolina Journal News Hour and on our website, carolinajournal.com. It's 5:38. Continuing our conversation this morning with David Larson. He is the opinion editor over at carolinajournal.com. David, we're talking about the devastation and destruction in western North Carolina. At this point, at least 5 school districts have no plans to reopen as of right now as they assess damage. Some of the schools still being used as shelters for folks that are recovering out west. You mentioned this concept of a micro school or a pod school, and that's something that folks in North Carolina might not be super familiar with. Can you dive into some more details on that?
Sure. So this is something that was a trend during COVID, as I was saying, and it really took off. And Politico has an interesting article on it from this summer that talks about how it's kind of the next big school choice phenomenon potentially, and how it's spread. People liked it during COVID. It's sort of a one-room schoolhouse type thing, but basically what it is, it's a private school, so it's not homeschooling. It's probably somewhere in between a private school and homeschooling is how it feels to a lot of people. But it's, friends and extended family or people in your neighborhood just deciding we're going to have a small school. We're going to rent a room at a basement of a church. We're going to have maybe a conference room at a business. But it's going to be pretty, loosely affiliated. It's not as integral maybe as like a normal public school. But the idea is that it's still an organized school, and so they can get opportunity scholarships, which are, North Carolina's voucher program. So there's one Burbella school and micro schools in Burlington. They get opportunity scholarships. So the idea is just to have very small class sizes and school sizes, basically. But the biggest obstacle for them has largely been where to meet, because to be zoned as a place that's a school, it's a few extra steps. You have to get more sign off from the state and from the county than just to be a learning center or just to be a church basement does, where you can get the fire marshal to sign off. And so in Florida, they were able to, Governor DeSantis signed a bill for this school year that allowed more places for private schools that kind of by right they can have movie theaters, museums, classroom, church, like huge list of places that if they're places that the fire marshal signed off on, if they're places that are willing to rent to a micro school, a classroom to them, then they can do that. So, in a place like Western North Carolina, if there's not an open school in your holler and you got 10 families in your little valley that are sort of landlocked and not able to get out to other places too easily, and there's a little church, down the country road, maybe they can rent a classroom to you, that kind of thing. So it just opens up a lot more possibilities in a flexible way, maybe in a situation like this.
Well, and when we say the term micro school, I want to dive in onto that. This is actually micro. I mean, we're talking about between 10 and 20 students in many cases here, David. These are truly very small class sizes and do actually fit the definition of what I think most people would think of as a small group of people, right?
Yes. So in the Politico article, I've seen different definitions, but that article says 30 or fewer students. I mean, I'm sure it's not, Webster's definition somewhere, but that's the idea, is usually somewhere between 10 and 30. And so if you get something in your mind, think of that old one-room schoolhouse often in the frontier where there's a small village of people and they hire a teacher and she teaches all the kids. So it's a similar idea to that. So yeah, pretty small, but the more organized versions are private schools. In our statute, in order to be a private school, you have to have 100 kids or anything like that. So there's no legal issue with having a very small private school, which is what this is. Homeschool co-op is maybe a similar thing, but that is not an official thing. And often homeschool co-ops, they don't meet every day. So this would be slightly more organized than that towards the private school.
Oh, and you talked about some of the benefits in the last segment about what went on in areas around New Orleans where they had very low test scores. They implement these smaller schools, David, and the test scores, in some cases, it sounds like they've doubled as a result. Now, that's been over a 20-year period of time, I'll note, but they still have significantly increased from where they were. So there's obviously something in here that's working.
Yes, and that was charter schools, so maybe a little different, but I think both of those are similar in that they can be very community led. They can be very small and nimble. They can meet, you can have a charter school meet in a number of places. And so I think both of those are really good options. They're not exactly the same, but they're small, community led, very organic. And often, as you say, if there is a poor performing school, I'm not calling out any particular district out west. I'm sure there lots of great schools out there, but in the case of New Orleans, there were. But they are able to give the kind of individualized attention in these sort of examples to where it can really improve. People don't slip through the cracks in the same way if you have one-on-one attention, if the parents are very involved, if there's parent volunteers and all of that. So I do think these kind of intimate, small, community-led things can really can be a good way to teach, and it's got a lot of historical precedent to it.
You can read more on David's opinion piece over on our website, carolinajournal.com. It's 5:45, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time for a look at your Monday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks, Nick. We have
full show.
This afternoon at 3.
News Talk 1110 and 99.3.
WBT.
WBT's Talktoberfest 2024 rolls on. Join us every Monday and Wednesday in Talktober at 7 p.m. on the WBT Facebook Live feed for a fun discussion about everything that's going on as we sit here 22 days ahead of the presidential election to what's going on in Charlotte, whatever is on your mind. Hopefully you can join us every Monday and Wednesday from September 30th through Talktober the 28th. It's WBT's Talktoberfest 2024 presented by Craft Body Scans. You can visit WBT.com for more details. I'll be on tonight, 7 o'clock. Me, Pete Callender, and Vince Coakley will be taking your questions and chatting about everything in regards to the election and as we roll on to late November. All right, 5:51 now, the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We continue to keep an eye on the presidential race, and with that, the vice president in Kamala Harris was in North Carolina this weekend. She spent Sunday afternoon with a crowd at East Carolina University in Greenville as we sit here 22 days ahead of Election Day. Harris, who spoke for less than 25 minutes, said that her campaign is, well, moving forward and they're laser focused on the issues of the day.
Ours is a campaign focused on issues that matter, for example, to working families across America, like bringing down the cost of living, investing in small businesses and entrepreneurs. We are focused on protecting reproductive freedom. We are focused on keeping our nation secure.
She claimed that the former president's campaign is one that is looking at the past and will not put the American people first. She then claimed, well, that former President Donald Trump is seemingly hiding.
It makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on?
Analysis from Fox News indicates that the Trump-Vance ticket, those two combined, have done 74 interviews since August compared to just 39 for the Harris and Walz campaign. She spoke about some of the issues that she believes is the most important at that campaign stop in Greenville. With that, the Republican vice presidential candidate in U.S. Senator J.D. Vance has got a campaign rally scheduled in Wilmington on Wednesday as, well, both Republican and Democrats at the top of the ticket continue to be focused on North Carolina as a major swing state. We'll learn more about the state of the race in North Carolina coming up later this week when the Carolina Journal poll is released. We'll have details on that coming up right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Taking a look at some other news from across the state this morning in Moore County, deputies arrested a man on Friday that they said were removing political signs the day before. According to a Facebook post from the Moore County Sheriff's Office, a deputy saw a man by the name of Lowell Simon around 5:25 p.m. Thursday removing campaign signs from a roadside. The deputy, who was responding to a completely unrelated crime at the time, followed up at Simon's home and found the signs in his vehicle. Simon is not a regular resident or citizen. He is a candidate for State House, a Democrat candidate for State House, and the head of the Democrat Party in Moore County. He admitted to removing the signs, which deputies recovered and returned to their original owners. Authorities issued a warrant for his arrest on Friday and charged him with 2 counts of misdemeanor larceny of a political sign. He was released under a written promise to appear in court later this month. In response to Simon's arrest, the Moore County Democrat Party, of which he chairs, wrote, and I quote, "Moore County Democrats and Democrats across the state do not condone theft or destruction of property regarding political signs," end quote. And the Democrat House Campaign Caucus said, quote, "We acknowledge that Lowell Simon was caught doing something we don't condone. We're addressing it and moving forward. Not only is this something that the Democrat House Campaign Caucus says they don't condone, it's something that is absolutely illegal in the state of North Carolina. We'll continue to track details on that right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. And with all of the great support that has poured out for Western North Carolina, Samaritan's Purse, who's been leading a lot of those efforts, they're a Boone-based Christian humanitarian aid organization. They received a check for over $50,000 from the state of North Carolina's Treasurer's Office on Friday. That was to aid their ongoing recovery efforts from Hurricane Helene. State Treasurer Dale Folwell, accompanied by local legislatures, presented the check to Samaritan's Purse representatives at their North Wilkesboro office late last week. The funds, which were discovered in the state's unclaimed property division, will help the organization continue to provide vital relief to communities that were hit hard by the hurricane, including roof tarping, debris cleanup, and essential supplies like food and water. Samaritan's Purse is well known for its global disaster response efforts and is currently focusing on helping homeowners and churches in the affected areas of Western North Carolina, including the likes of Boone, Asheville, and surrounding counties. Volunteers from across the country, alongside local chaplains from the Billy Graham Evangelist Association, are also providing emotional and spiritual support to those families devastated by the storm. The organization encourages people to volunteer or donate, as well as pray to those that were impacted by not only that disaster, but the disaster in Florida as well. That's going to do it for a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. What's going on with the Christmas tree farm economy out in Western North Carolina? We'll have details on that, plus a new update on a quartz mine facility that was shut down in regards to Hurricane Helene. All that and more heading your way on a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour, starting at 5 a.m. right here on WBT.